Welcome, Gunrunner.
Two things that I've definitely learned since I started this channel is that you guys love videos on failed systems, and also love videos covering more obscure systems too. Indeed, the two are often one and the same, so I'm always thinking about new ways I can cover both. And I got thinking about the time around the Great North American video game crash, where all the major players in the industry started to panic as the market imploded and tried to make the transition from producing home consoles to home computers. Atari, of course, had already secured a seat at the table, following the successful launch of the Atari 2600 video computer system in 1977, with the release of two great micros in the Atari 400 and 800 in 1979. But their many rivals were not so quick to diversify, seemingly content to ride the console wave and make hay while the sun shined. But the panic caused by the crash saw them scramble to try and get their own computers out the door, to compete with the likes of the Apple II, Commodore 64, Tandy Coco, and of course the Atari 8-bits. As you probably know already, this rush to market meant that many corners had to be cut, and this saw a glut of machines that were either buggy and unfinished, or far too late to the party to grab a slice of the cake. And that is exactly what we're going to be looking at in this video. Those 8-bit computers from panicking console companies that were too late, too underpowered, and too unappealing to make consumers take notice. Although a few of these 5 have been covered on the channel before, I think you'll still find some surprises in here and learn something new. As always, make sure you share your own thoughts at the end. Now let's get started, shall we?
Hold it. Do not buy your family a computer until you compare Adam with Atari, IBM, or Commodore. Compare components. Adam has an 80K memory, data pack drive, built-in word processing, professional keyboard, letter quality 80-column printer. Compare price. At $499 complete, Adam is hundreds of dollars below most other systems. Compare Adam. Today's complete computer system, only $499.
Now let's get started with the most obvious one, and the one that most of you would have probably predicted before the video even got going. It's also a computer that I've already covered numerous times on this channel, including a whole amazing facts video that was dedicated to the Adam, which I will of course link in the description. So for that reason, I'm not going to go into massive detail here. If you want to know more, just watch that other video. What you do need to know is that in 1983, Coleco Industries were starting to feel the impacts of a very crowded video game market that would eventually lead on to the much talked about North American video game crash. Like many other companies were, they were already looking towards the lucrative and ever-growing home computer market to help them combat these losses. The likes of the Apple II, Atari 800 and Tandy Coco, and in particular the recently released Commodore 64, were experiencing a loss of success, and Coleco very much wanted a slice of that pie. Called the Coleco Adam and based on the same hardware as their existing console, it would feature the proprietary built-in tape drive, an extended 64K of RAM, full-size keyboard, printer and productivity software. Unlike all its rivals, the Adam wouldn't actually have BASIC built in, needing to load anything except the standard BIOS from tape or cartridge. As well as a full-blown computer, Coleco would also offer the Adam as a money-saving add-on to the ColecoVision console itself, hoping to tempt their existing user base into making the move to their hardware over anyone else's. The announcement of the Adam caused a tremendous buzz in the media, and it seemed that success was almost being taken for granted. But as you probably know already, almost nothing went as planned, as Coleco suffered a series of disastrous setbacks that completely killed the Adam within a year of its release. The computer missed no less than 5 proposed release dates, went up in price twice from what was initially shown on the original adverts, was plagued with reliability issues that saw 4 out of 5 computers return to retailers with various issues, and they shipped less than 100,000 computers to retailers for the busy Christmas period after promising that 500,000 would be available. And it was the Adam that put the final nail in the coffin for Coleco's computer and video games division, and by the end of 1984 they had left the sector completely and returned to producing children's toys. Despite being designed and manufactured by a huge company like Sega, the SG1000 remains a pretty obscure console within the retro gaming world, but it was the successor, the Sega Master System, that really put the company on the console map. But even less people seem to be aware of the SG1000 sibling, a fully compatible computer called the SC3000. Whereas the SG before the 1000 stands for Sega Game, the SC stands for Sega Computer, and it was released on the exact same day, which also happened to be the exact same day as the Nintendo Famicom. The SC3000 was designed as a reasonably priced entry into home computing, which is no doubt evident by the ZX Spectrum style rubberized chiclet keyboard. That said, Sega did release a later revision of the computer called the SC3000H, with a more professional full travel keyboard, hoping to persuade more people that it was indeed a proper computer. As well as being able to use all SG1000 cartridges, as well as cassette tapes, Sega also released a special add-on which enabled the computer to use floppy disks too. The Super Control Station SF7000 was released in 1984 for an asking price of 79,800 yen. It would allow the user to run software off 3-inch floppy disks, as well as adding a further 64K of RAM, 8KB of ROM, a Centronics parallel port, and an RS-232 serial port. But the high price of the unit meant that it was never very successful, and these are now extremely rare and hard to find, far more so than the computer itself. Although the SC3000 was designed with both business and gaming in mind, it was obviously more suited to the latter, with Sega's undoubted arcade pedigree. The hardware inside is almost identical to both the ColecoVision and indeed the MSX. In fact, Sega considered releasing their own MSX compatible computer, but just decided to copy the hardware design and go it alone instead. This proved to be a rather unwise decision, because whilst the MSX computers prospered, Sega's faded into obscurity, being almost completely abandoned by the time the Sega Master System came along in 1985. It was also released in Australia and New Zealand by Grandstand, and also distributed in several Asian and European countries such as Korea and Italy under the Yano branding, but this did little to change its fortunes. Okay, so the next entry isn't actually a standalone computer, it was only ever sold as an add-on, but I think it still qualifies, and to be honest, it was too good a story to leave out. As I'm sure you all know, the Nintendo Family Computer was simply an expansion for the existing 8-bit Famicom console, which came to the rest of the world as the Nintendo Entertainment System. In fact, Famicom was simply an abbreviation of Family Computer, so I guess the release of this add-on was kind of obvious. This add-on comprised of a full-size keyboard and a basic cartridge that needed to be inserted into your Famicom console. You could also connect up a Nintendo branded tape recorder, which was sold separately, or use your own, so you could save and load programs. The cartridge did also have a limited amount of battery backup to save programs too also, although this was reportedly very unreliable. The keyboard was connected to the expansion port situated at the front of the Famicom, which was removed from the NES, meaning it will only work on these Japanese consoles. The BASIC delivered with the keyboard is the NS Hue BASIC, where the N stands for Nintendo, S for Sharp, and Hue for Hudson, as they all contributed to this project. Once inserted, there is only 1,982 bytes of RAM free to play with, as it uses the stock Famicom hardware with no additional enhancements. The keyboard really is just a keyboard, meaning the BASIC cartridge is almost as useless as the one made for the Atari 2600. This is the main reason the add-on failed to take off, because the memory was too limited to make it useful, despite the basic language itself actually being very good. Why Nintendo didn't include extra RAM in the add-on is anyone's guess, a truly baffling decision. Interestingly, when Nintendo decided to bring the Famicom to the West, firstly in partnership with Atari before that deal fell through and they went it alone, the keyboard add-on was actually included as part of the standard setup. Then called the Nintendo Video Entertainment System, it would be marketed as a console-computer hybrid, much like the later Atari XE game system, and featured a very different design aesthetic to what we eventually got in the NES. But after receiving a glut of negative feedback from the various test markets and consumer focus groups, they went back to the drawing board and came up with the ugly grey lunchbox we all know and love instead. I'm sure that a lot of the people watching this video will be saying, who the hell are CCE? But at the same time, I'm also sure that my Brazilian viewers, and I know there are a few of you, are screaming at the screen in delight at the very mention of their name, as CCE are a hugely influential company in the history of video games in Brazil, and are actually still going to this day. CCE, which is the Portuguese abbreviation of Comercio de Componentes Eletrónicos, I'm sure I pronounced this wrong, which translates to Electronic Components Trading, was founded in 1964 by Isaac Sverner as one of the first Brazilian home electronics companies. They came about in part due to a law that saw heavy taxes placed on import electronics. The same law that prompted Tectoy to become Sega's official partner in Brazil. This saw them develop all sorts of products such as TVs, telephones, radios and stereos, but the rise of video games in the early 80s became the big catalyst for their success. Although Atari already had an official partner in Brazil in the form of Polyvox, who sold near identical versions of the 2600 video computer system and its games, that didn't stop other companies from cloning the hardware and releasing their own versions, not to mention the glut of bootleg games that came with them. One such company was CCE, of course, and in 1983 they released the super game VG2800 to enormous success, as well as a large range of totally unlicensed games. The VG3000 followed 2 years later, as CCE dominated the video game market in Brazil. Indeed, they would swap making 2600 copies to making Famiclones instead not long after, which included the popular Top Game and Turbo Game systems. Having already cleaned up in the home console market, they were keen to do the same with home computers. They soon released their own clones of the Apple II computer in the form of the Exacto range, but many of their rivals were doing the same, so they were keen to offer something a bit more unique that would allow them to build their own legacy. They were also encouraged to do so by the Brazilian government, who were offering extra tax breaks for the creation of a genuine Brazilian computer. This new computer would be called the MC1000, not to be confused with the Tandy MC10, which is a totally unrelated home micro, although there are actually a few similarities in both the hardware and its design. But that's not to say that it wasn't a copy of someone else's system, because it actually was, but in this case they had officially licensed the technology rather than just straight ripping it off. In 1983, a Hong Kong-based company called GEM had unveiled a computer they called the GEM 1000, which itself was a cost-reduced version of another computer from Korea, the Samsung SPC 1000. They had purchased the rights to this design from Samsung after they chose to adopt the MSX standard instead, and in a similar fashion to the MSX, GEM hoped to license it out to other regional companies around the world. Indeed, around the same time, two 100% compatible computers were also unveiled, called the Rabbit RX83 and Charlemagne 999. The CCE Micro would actually be an exact copy of the latter, that even used the same case design. Unfortunately, nobody was interested in CCE's new computer. It seemed their prestigious name counted for naught in this sector. Brazilian consumers were more than happy with the existing range of Apple II, ZX Spectrum and MSX clones that were available, especially as these had considerably more software. The MC1000 was far from impressive on a technical level too, offering no advantages over its many rivals. Released in late 1984, it was discontinued just a year later, with many of the promised add-ons such as disk drives and printers never even making it into production. CCE stuck to producing their cloned hardware after this and never re-entered the computer market. If we look at all the big players from the first console war, we will see that every single one of them also migrated into making home computers too. Atari with the 400 and 800, Coleco with the Adam, Philips with the MSX, and of course Mattel with their Aquarius. The subject of this last entry. In fact, the reason why I saved this one until the end is because it represents the biggest failure of them all. Although it was far too late to the party to make any real impact, the Aquarius was actually one of the first home computers from these companies to be announced, before the aforementioned Adam and MSX in fact, with Mattel first unveiling their plans in 1982. Wanting to compete with Atari in the growing home computer market, Mattel spoke to Hong Kong-based electronics company Radafin, who manufactured the Intellivision on their behalf, and as it turns out, they had a very quick answer to Mattel's query. You see, Radofin were already developing two low-cost home computers codenamed Checkers and Chess, and they offered to sell these to Mattel Electronics, who quickly took them up on this offer. Although this meant their new home computer wouldn't be Intellivision compatible, as they originally hoped, it did mean they could bring it to the market a lot quicker. Or so Mattel hoped, because Radofin started hitting a lot of problems with the development of their new computers, which had now become the Aquarius 1 and Aquarius 2, which wasn't helped by Mattel's endless meddling, where they kept insisting on various changes, many of which just weren't possible. Radofin were then asked to just focus on the Aquarius 1 so they could get this to market, and the computer eventually limped out the door in 1983 after seemingly endless delays. And the result was incredibly underwhelming. The Aquarius was widely criticised for its horrible chiclet keyboard, underpowered hardware that was way behind its rivals, and lack of original games, with most of the software being greatly downgraded ports from the Intellivision. Although there were some positives, like the low $160 price tag, which would be nearly $500 adjusted for inflation, powerful Microsoft Basic, and a range of add-ons which included a 300 baud modem, thermal printer and disk drive, these weren't enough to save it, and Mattel discontinued the Aquarius after just 4 months, making it the shortest lived home computer ever. In fact, they were so desperate to offload it that they paid Radofin to take the rights back from them, and then the Hong Kong based company released the Aquarius 2 with its extra RAM and improved keyboard under their own name. But this was also quite short lived, with the computer being discontinued again sometime towards the end of 1984, around a year after its initial debut.
Don't be lured by Commodore and TI's low-priced computer keyboards. You're not getting the whole picture. If you want a complete home computer system, the price will pile up fast. Introducing the Aquarius home computer system from Mattel Electronics, a complete system for a lot less. It comes with all this and an amazing feature no one else has, a 13-inch color TV for just $99. Buy the Aquarius system by June 20th, we'll send you a $300 color TV for $99.
And that rounds up my look at 5 failed computers from successful console companies. Did you get burnt by buying one of these duds back in the day, or do you feel they got a rough deal and deserved better? I also love to hear the thoughts and views of my audience, so please get typing in that comments section. Before I go though, I must thank all of my loyal patrons who continue to support my channel and make videos like this possible. However, I must give special thanks to the following patrons and YouTube backers in particular for their much appreciated pledges: Paul Daniel, Mins, Dos Gamerman, Luke MC, Carl Olsen, Seth Robinson, Grady Haynes, Mark Strickland, Colima Torn, Trogdor the Burninator, Daniel Skoronsky, Ben P. Stein, Tabby Kitsune, Alan J. Dodds, and Electron Star Collapse. If you also want to help support all my creative endeavours, including this YouTube channel, then please go and check out my Patreon right now. You can get access to host content, including downloads, exclusive videos, creative insights, and much more besides. I've been the Laird, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you all again for another video very soon.